Welcome to the Trellix Spotlight series. My name is Nick, and I will be your host. Today's session will focus on performing kernel module updates for ENS for Linux and TACC for Linux. This webinar will be recorded. If you prefer not to participate in the recorded session, please feel free to disconnect at this time. A link to today's recorded presentation will be emailed to all registered attendees. This webinar is a brief overview covering common use cases and scenarios regarding this topic. It is not intended to be all-encompassing. If assistance is needed, please contact Trellix Technical Support. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them in the Q&A window. This webinar may run longer or shorter based on your participation, and we recommend asking as many questions as you can to make the most of this series. If the Q&A window is not displayed, click the tab at the bottom of your session window and click on the Q&A icon. We will answer the questions during the final section of this webinar. If you experience any audio issues during the webcast, please drop and attempt to reconnect. Our speaker today is Karthik Ravichandran. Karthik serves as an advanced support engineer and is a highly valued member of the global Linux and Mac support team. With a wealth of experience spanning over a decade, Karthik has built a deep and comprehensive expertise specifically in the domain of supporting complex security products designed for various operating systems, with a particular focus on the Linux and Mac OS environments. Ladies and gentlemen, Karthik.
Thank you, Nick. Hello, everyone. Today's discussion will cover what is a kernel module and what is a kernel module update. And we will also provide a detailed overview on how to perform a kernel module update for Endpoint Security Linux and how to perform the kernel module update for Trellix application and change control. So, what is a kernel module? A kernel module is a code loaded and unloaded from the running Linux kernel to dynamically extend its functionality. Example, device drivers, file system, custom system calls. And the user space application interacts with this kernel module via system calls and device files. Now let's see what is a kernel module update. A kernel module update is a package that facilitates the upgrade of product's existing kernel module, and this allows for compatibility with additional kernel versions without requiring an update to the core product versions. For example, let's consider a Linux system with the product version x.y and kernel module version 1 loaded on a Linux kernel version a.p and running successfully. Now, if we upgrade a Linux kernel to a newer version c.d, there is a probability that the kernel module version 1 may not be compatible with a newer version and it will not be loaded. So to overcome this, we use a kernel module update package where on top of existing product version x.y, deploying a kernel module update package will update the kernel module to version 2, a compatible module, which will be loaded to a newer kernel version successfully and continues its functionality. By using kernel module update package, there is no need to perform a complete upgrade of the core product version. Now let's see a detailed overview on how to perform a kernel module update package for endpoint security for Linux. As mentioned on the previous slide, the kernel module update package provides the support for newer kernel updates without requiring us to upgrade the endpoint security product. But there are scenarios where if we have endpoint security for Linux 10.7.5 or later is deployed and a new kernel module update package is available for that version, then we must use kernel module update package for updating the kernel modules. But if we have endpoint security for Linux 10.7.4 or earlier checked in and deployed on the system, then our recommendation here is to upgrade the endpoint security for Linux along with the newer kernel module update package. And it is always advisable to be on the latest version of endpoint security Linux to have an enhanced security with the new features. In this session, we will perform kernel module update using EPO as well as standalone. First, we will see how to perform a kernel module update using EPO. A key requirement is to have a system with ENSL 10.7.5 or later version installed and running. And the another requirement is the system must be communicating with EPO. Okay. Once we have the system met the criteria, the following step has to be done. Step 1 is to check in the package into EPO main repository. Step 2 is to create a product update task. Step 3 is to assign the task to the system where the kernel module update has to be done. Step 4 is to perform a wake up call, and step 5 is to validate the kernel module update. Let's see a quick walkthrough on the mentioned steps. I've logged into my EPO. The step 1 is to check in the kernel module update package into our main repository. In order to do that, we need to click on menu, go to software catalog, and under the category, select endpoint security and search for the product name endpoint security for Linux threat prevention. It will list the product, expand it, and that's where we will see the endpoint security kernel module for Linux. 10.7.22 build 3045 is the latest one. We need to select that and click on action and then check in. Accept the license agreement and then click on check in again. So this will check in the package into the main repository. Let's give it a quick minute. Here we go. So it got checked into the current branch. Let's quickly validate the same by getting into main repository. Click on menu and go to main repository. So if you scroll down, we see the kernel module update package, which is the content that is updated. Now the next step is to create a product update client task. In order to do that, we need to click on menu, go to client task catalog and select Trellix agent and then click on new task. Select the task type as product update and then click on OK. Here we can give a name, this being a 10.7.22. We'll give the 10.7.22 kernel module update. And then under the package type, we need to select Trellix Endpoint Security kernel module 10.7.22. This is the one which we checked in. And then click on save. Now we have successfully created the product update task. Now the next step is to assign this task to a system that requires a kernel update. So now let's go to the system tree and let me select this machine. I think this machine has endpoint security 10.7.21 and let's check the kernel update, kernel module version. So under endpoint security platform, under about section, we'll get to know the current kernel module version which is installed on the system. So it has 10.7.21. So now let me quickly go ahead and assign the task which we created so that the kernel module version will be updated to 10.7.22. So for which we need to click on action, agent, and edit task on single system, and then click on new client task assignment. Select Trellix agent, product update, and then select the task which we created. And down below, select the schedule type as run immediately, and then click on save. So now we have assigned the task, but we need to give a wake up call so that the agent can reach out to the EPO and downloads this task. So let me quickly go ahead and give a wake up call to this agent. So I'll force complete task and update and then click on OK. Now I've given a wake up call. Let's give it a quick minute. So the wake up agent is completed successfully. Let's quickly check from the EPO whether the task has been received on the client end or not. For that, under the system, click on applied client task. And this is where it should show the task setting up to date is true. which basically means the task has been received and currently being executed. Let's give it another quick minute. Yeah, now let's quickly check the version and the security platform. Let's scroll down to kernel module and we see it got updated. Though the product base version remains the same, which is 10.7.21, we just updated the kernel module from EPO. Now let's see how to perform kernel module update on a standalone system. The requirement remains the same. The system must have endpoint security for Linux 10.7.5 or later version installed and running. Once we have the system ready, the first step is to download the kernel module update package from our product download site. Second step is to copy the file to a system where the kernel module update has to be done. Step 3 is to unzip the copied package using unzip command and extract them to a folder kernel_module. And step 4, this step varies with the version what we have on the system. If the system has endpoint security for Linux 10.7.17 or earlier, we will have to unpack the kernel module update, move the RPMs to a clean temp folder, and force a local installation using yum and restart the threat prevention services to apply the changes. But if you have a system with 10.7.18 or later, we will just have to run a script file which will automatically performs the kernel module updates. Let's see a quick walkthrough on the all above mentioned steps. Now let's see how to download kernel module update package from our product download site. For that, we need to open a browser and log into trellix.com/download/myproducts using your grant number. After logging in, under search by product name, search for endpoint security threat prevention, and that will list the product. Click on the threat prevention module and filter by package, and that will show a list of all the packages which are available, from which we need to choose the latest one, which is endpoint security kernel module for Linux 10.7.22 build 3045, which is the latest one as of today. And once we download them, we will have to move this package to the system which requires the kernel module update. Let me quickly copy the package to the test machine. The package is copied to the temp. Okay, here is the package which we downloaded. Now, before we proceed with the installation, let's see what is the version of the product installed on the system and the module version loaded. So for that, we're going to use opt McAfee ENS TP bin and MFE TP CLI - version that will list as the version of the product. So this system has endpoint security for Linux threat prevention 10.7.17. Now let's see what are the modules that are loaded. For that, we use lsmod. And as you can see, there are two kernel modules loaded. Yes, the endpoint security for threat prevention ships along with two modules. One is the file access kernel module, and another one is AAC kernel module. So the file access kernel module is used to hook into the file related system calls relevant for on access scan module, and it communicates with the user space threat prevention process over netlink. If FA notify is enabled, on access module uses FA notify, and we can always switch between FA notify and file access kernel module using the switch. And the AAC kernel module is used to hook into files, directory, signals related system calls relevant for access protection and exploit prevention module. Now let's quickly go ahead and perform the kernel module update. And as this system has ENS 10.7.17, we will have to unpack the kernel module update, and then we'll be moving the RPMs to a clean temp folder, and we'll perform the local installation using M and then restart of the threat prevention services. So first, let's go ahead and unzip the package. For that, yeah, and the kernel module package, what we have is the latest, and it got extracted. So now let me navigate to the folder and unpack the bundle. Creating a separate folder. And let me extract the package into that folder. Extraction is completed. Now let's create a clean temp directory under root. I name it ENS underscore PKG. And I'm also creating another directory. Under ENS PKG as install. Yeah. Now let's go back to the directory where we extracted the complete package. And now we will be copying the RPMs from the extracted unpacked folder to the clean temp directory which we created. Oh yeah, I missed creating the clean temp file install folder under the clean temp file. Let me have it corrected. And now let's copy it. Okay, now the file is copied successfully. Now let's perform the installation using the yum. Okay, now that was fast. Yeah, it's installing. Let's give it a minute. So the installation of RPMs is completed successfully. Now we will have to stop and start our services. So let me stop RMFE TPD service. Okay, it stopped, and let's go ahead and start the service again. completed. Um, let's go ahead and check the status. Yeah, it's successful. Now let's quickly validate the module update using ls mod. So here we go. As we can see, the file access module has been updated successfully to 22.10.7.22.3045, the version we installed. And this is how we will be performing the standalone installation of kernel module update. As we have seen how to perform kernel module update on a system with ENSL 10.7.17 or earlier, now I would like to show you how to perform the kernel module update on a systems with which has endpoint security for Linux 10.7.18 or later version. This is another system. I've copied the downloaded kernel module update to a temp folder. It's under temp. Yeah, it is a package. But before we proceed further, let's check the version of the product installed. So the system has endpoint security for Linux threat prevention 10.7.21. And now let's quickly check the module version loaded using lsmod. And yeah, as we could see, this has 10.7.21.878. Yep. So now let's go ahead and proceed with the installation. So first thing, we will have to unzip the downloaded package using unzip and extract them to a separate folder called kernel underscore module. It's extracting. Yeah. So it's completed. Now let's go to the folder. And this folder, just because this is the latest version, 10.7.18 or later, so we can directly go ahead and run the script. So all you have to do is just execute the script, update-esp kernel module.sh, and this will take care of the installation. Let's give it a minute. It's automatically installing. So the update is completed successfully. Now let's check the status. Yeah, as we could see, the module has been successfully updated. And this is how to perform the kernel module update on a standalone system, which has the endpoint security for Linux 10.7.18 or later versions. Now let's see how to perform kernel module update for Trellix application and change control. Just like endpoint security kernel module update package, the Trellix application and change control kernel module update package provides support for new kernel updates without requiring us to upgrade the product. But there are scenarios where if we have the application change control version 6.6.6 or later deployed on our managed endpoints, we must use the kernel module update package for updating. But if we have application change control 6.6.5 or earlier versions deployed, then we must first upgrade the product and then update the newer kernel module package. Let's see the steps required to perform the kernel module update using EPO. First thing is to check in the package into the main repository in the same branch where the product is checked in. Then, a very important step is to place the system in the update mode before installing the new package. Then, we will have to create a product update task and assign the task to the system where the kernel module update has to be done. Then, we have to perform a wake up call and wait for the task to get completed. Once the task is completed, we can verify the package on the managed endpoint using the rpm-qa command for RPM-based distribution or dpkg-l for Debian-based distribution. Let's see a quick walkthrough of the mentioned steps. I have logged into my EPO server. Now let's see how to check an application and change control kernel module update into EPO main repository. To check in the package, we will have to click on menu and under softwares, click on software catalog and search with the keyword solid core kernel. From the displayed list, expand the product and we are seeing the list of all available solid core kernel module for Linux. From this list, I'm choosing the latest one, which is 6.6.9.443, and I'm clicking on actions and check in to check in the package. Now let's go ahead and accept the license agreement and click on check in again. Let's give it a quick minute. It's completed now. Let's go to main repository and confirm the same, for which we need to click on menu and go to main repository and search for solid core. Oh, here we go. So we have got the kernel module for Linux 6.9.9 is checked in the current branch in the same way how the product is also checked into the current branch. So now the next step, before creating the product update task, a very important step that needs to be performed, which is placing the system in the update mode. To do that, let's go ahead and select the system from the system tree. Let me select this machine, and this machine actually has solid core version 6.6.6, and the current status is enabled. The solid core is currently in enable status. So to change the status to update mode, we will have to push a solid core task to that machine. To do that, we'll have to click on action, agent, edit task on single system. And select new client task assignment. And under task to schedule, we need to click on solid core and select the task type begin update mode. And now we don't have any task. So let's go ahead and click on create new task. And let's give a name. Let's say begin update mode. And there are a few additional fields, optional fields like description, workflow ID, and comments. These are very much useful for your change management and ticketing system, but they are optional. Let's go ahead and click save and scroll down to schedule type where we want the task to be pushed immediately. So let's change that to run immediately and let's go ahead and save the task. So now we have successfully assigned the update mode task to this machine. However, in order for this to take effect immediately, we will have to perform a wake up call. So let me click on wake call, force complete policy and task update, and let's click on OK. Let's give it a quick minute. And let's check whether the task has been applied or not. So for that, from EPO, we can click on applied client task. Oh, here we go. The task what we have created is up to date on the system. So let's give it a few more minutes and give a wake up call so that and confirm whether the status has been updated to update mode. We wake up call. Okay. Let's quickly refresh and check the status. Okay, here we go. The solid core status is set to update. Now the next step is to create a product update task and assign to this mission to the system. So we can do the same way like how we did the begin update task. So now to do that, we're gonna click on action, agent, and edit task on single system. Not this. Click on action, agent, and edit task on single system. And now we're gonna add a new client task assignment. And this time we'll be selecting Trellix agent and choose product update. So I've already created a task. Let me quickly show you the task which I created. Yeah. So we have to make sure that the package type, under package type, we need to select solid core kernel module for Linux, the one which you have just checked in. We need to make sure that this has been checked in. And then click on OK and scroll down to the schedule type and set them to run immediately and save the task. Right now, the task is not updated. We've just assigned it. So let's go ahead and perform another wake up call to the system. Let's give it a minute. Let's quickly check the applied client task. Oh yeah, we could see the task what we pushed is up to date on the system. Now all we have to do is wait for the task to get completed. And then let me quickly switch to that Linux system to verify whether the package has been updated. Let's give it a quick minute. So this is the Linux system where we pushed the kernel module update. So let's verify the package using rpm command, rpm query all pipe grep -i solid core. Okay, here we go. So as we can see, the kernel module package is updated to 6.6.9-443, the one that we pushed. So unlike endpoint security for Linux, application change control Linux module will not be loaded unless the system is rebooted. So it is mandatory to reboot the system after the installation of the kernel module update. Now let's see how to perform kernel module update on a standalone system. The very first step is to download the kernel module package from our product download site. Once downloaded, we need to place the system in the update mode using sadmin-bu command. Once that's done, we will have to copy the downloaded file to the system. And then, as a next step, we will have to extract the package content into a new directory, TACC kernel module, using unzip utility. And as a next step, we will have to change the current working directory to a newly created directory using cd command and execute the installation script under that directory, which is mapkg_install.sh. Once the execution is completed, we will have to restart the services using service sesrvc restart. And then we can go ahead and verify the package version using rpm-qa, or if you're using Debian, then tpkg-l. Now let's see a quick walkthrough of the mentioned step. To perform kernel module update on a standalone system, first step is to download the kernel module package from our product download site. I've already logged into our product download site using grant number. And first thing, we need to make sure that we uncheck show only latest version. And on the search bar, we need to search for Trellix application control 6.6. That will list the product. Click on the product name, and this will list all the latest available kernel modules. We will need a solid core kernel module for Linux 6.6.9, which is the latest one available. Click on this link to download the package. So the package is already downloaded. Let me quickly have this transfer to my Linux system. So yeah, this is my Linux system. I just copied the file under temp folder. So this is the package which we have just downloaded. Now, before we proceed further, let's quickly check what is a kernel module installed on this system. Use rpm-qa, and we see this system as kernel module 6.6.9 2262, which is which comes along with a base version of 6.6.9 product. And what we have right now is 6.6.9 443, the one which we'll be updating manually. So before we proceed with the installation, let's also check the solid core status and place the system in update mode. Let me check the status. Admin. Okay. This system is currently in enable mode. To place a machine in update mode, we use sadmin begin update bu. Okay, the solidifier is in update mode now. Let's proceed with the unzip of the package which we downloaded and extract them to the content. Extract the content to the clean directory, which is tacc underscore kernel underscore module. Package extraction completed. Now the next step is to change the directory to the extracted directory. Cd. Yeah. So now we are inside the extracted directory, and yeah, this is what these are the files which we have inside the directory. Now from here we will have to execute the installation script. So that's /mapkg underscore install.sh. Installation is started. Let's give it a minute. That was fast. So the installation is completed successfully. Now let's go ahead and restart our solid core service. Service got restarted. Let's quickly verify the module again. Okay, as we can see, the kernel module is successfully installed. Now, as mentioned earlier, a system reboot is required after the installation for the new kernel module to get loaded. And this is how we perform the application and change control kernel module update package on a standalone system. Thank you.
Thanks, Karthik. As a reminder for everyone, Trellix Education Services offers exceptional training to go along with our award-winning products. If you would like to learn more, please visit the website listed on your screen to see all of our offerings. Now let's get our Q&A session started. I see we have several questions, but it's not too late to add your question. Please type it in the Q&A window to submit. Additionally, take a moment to fill out the survey. Your feedback and suggestions are always appreciated. How frequent are these kernel module update releases?
So we release kernel module updates monthly for both Trellix Endpoint Security for Linux and Trellix Application and Change Control for Linux. This ensures you are constantly covered against the latest kernel variations.
That's perfect. Thank you for that, Karthik. Can we upgrade to the latest version of ENS LTP without checking in the latest ENS kernel module package?
That's definite no. We need the foundation in place first. We cannot upgrade threat prevention module successfully without having the latest endpoint security kernel module checked into the APO master repository. We should always make sure that the kernel module update package is assigned to the same branch as your threat prevention package before we upgrade.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that one as well. Endpoint Security for Linux product is installed successfully, but it's unable to find the kernel module using lsmod. What could be the reason for that?
That's a great question, and often it catches people off guard. There are usually two reasons for this. First, our kernel modules are dynamic. They only load when specific features are actually turned on. For example, the file access module only loads when on-access scanning is enabled, and MFA AACK loads only when access protection is enabled. If those features are disabled, the module unloads automatically. The second reason applies if you are specifically missing only file access module. You might have FA notify mode enabled. In this mode, instead of loading our own kernel modules, the product uses the built-in Linux kernel facility called FA notify to intercept the file system events. So if you don't see the modules, check if you are running in that mode.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that one. Next question. Is it recommended to upgrade Linux kernel before upgrading the kernel module update package?
The best practice here is actually the reverse. First, always check our knowledge base to validate that the new Linux kernel is supported. Once confirmed, we recommend you to install the kernel module update package first. This ensures the threat prevention module is ready and waiting to support the new Linux kernel the moment you upgrade the OS. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that one. Does the Trellix agent also require kernel module updates?
No, it doesn't. The Trellix agent is designed differently. It doesn't use a kernel module. All its functionality runs in user mode using a built-in system utilities. So you don't need to worry about kernel updates for agent itself. Thank you.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that one as well. It looks like that's most of the questions that we've got for today. There are a few questions in the Q&A that are a little bit more specific. What we'll do is we'll collect those questions on our side and follow up after the webinar directly with you attendees. I do want to thank everyone for joining today's webinar, and a big thank you to our speaker, Karthik. As a reminder, a link to today's recorded presentation will be emailed to all registered attendees. This concludes today's webinar. Stay safe, everyone.